Today, in this video, I'd like to discuss how we use acupuncture to treat erectile dysfunction, otherwise known as ED. First, what is ED? So, ED is a condition where men are unable to obtain and sustain an erection, so they can't have normal sexual function. To be expected if you're in your 70s and 80s, it's natural to have a decline in sexual function, although not necessarily required. However, the natural aging process does affect sexual function. But what we see very commonly is that men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s are suffering from erectile dysfunction and therefore are unable to have a normal sexual life. Acupuncture is extremely effective in resolving this condition. There is no known Western medical treatment to correct this. There are Western drugs that can be used one at a time to treat the symptoms of ED. However, they have no known solution. Chinese medicine actually does have a solution, and I'll talk a little bit about that in this video. From a Chinese medicine perspective, ED is caused by a decline in kidney function. Now, that's not talking about your actual kidneys, it's talking about your Chinese kidneys. Chinese medicine was designed and developed thousands of years ago, and we talk about organ function, different organ function all the time. And from a Chinese medicine perspective, sexual function resides in the kidneys. And when sexual function declines, it's because there's a weakness in the kidney function. Now, the first example I gave of somebody in their late 70s or 80s who have a decline in sexual function, that's because the kidneys over time, as we get older, will get weaker. However, when you're in your 40s, 50s, and 60s, your kidney function should still be fairly strong. So there's a reason, there must be a reason why kidney function is declining prematurely. Chinese medicine will identify that problem and treat to strengthen the kidneys. When we strengthen the kidney function, sexual function returns. There are three most common reasons why younger men will get ED. The first is when the man is living with a tremendous amount of stress. Either they've had a serious trauma or their daily stress levels are extremely high. What happens when we're exposed to a tremendous amount of stress is that stress damages organ function, and it differs from person to person. So, for example, people who get a lot of migraine headaches, who are under a lot of stress. The stress in this case very often will damage their Chinese liver function. And the liver has an important role in keeping qi circulating, and when qi stops circulating, it very often can cause pain and pain in the head. That's an example of how stress can induce migraines based on liver function. Well, when talking about erectile dysfunction, if you're living with very high levels of stress or you've had a trauma, that stress and trauma could actually damage kidney function. It's another organ that can be vulnerable to stress. So in this case, what we do is twofold. One, we have to address the stress in your life. Now, we cannot change the outside stressors affecting you, but what we can do with acupuncture is really boost up your ability to manage stress. So when stress hits you, you're able to move with it and not have it affect you so much. Imagine there's a storm and you have an old brittle tree, and the winds come and it can snap the tree. However, if you have a more supple tree, a willow tree for example, and the winds come, the tree is able to be more flexible in the wind. So the wind is there, but your response to it changes. That's what we do with acupuncture for stress. When we treat you for stress, we're building up your own ability to manage the stressors around you. That's the first stage. The second thing we have to do is treat the kidneys that have been damaged by the long-term exposure to stress. And that's what we call boosting and nourishing the kidneys. And we use that with acupuncture as well. The result is that the erectile dysfunction can be resolved and it's certainly improved. The next most common type of reason for erectile dysfunction is based on constitution. In other words, if your parents, one or both of your parents, had a constitutional weakness in the kidney function, they have passed that on to you, and you naturally have a weaker constitutional kidney function. It's similar to DNA, the DNA that you inherit from your parents. If the DNA is weaker in a certain aspect, in this case kidney function, then you will inherit that. And there are many ways that we can probe to find out if indeed your ED is based on a constitutional kidney weakness. The treatment for this is to strengthen kidney function. Now, there are two types of kidney function. One is what you inherit, and the other is what you can boost on a day-to-day basis. We focus on the day-to-day basis. We can't change your DNA. However, we can certainly change the way we nourish. It's almost as if we're giving a tune-up to the kidneys, a strong tune-up to the kidneys to boost its function enough to have your sexual function returned. The third scenario that we see most often with erectile dysfunction is a patient in their 40s, 50s, and 60s who is losing sexual function. However, when they were younger, in their 20s and 30s, they did a tremendous amount of partying, alcohol and drug consumption. This tends to burn the candle at both ends and severely deplete kidney function. Now, these cases do not respond as well to acupuncture. It's a much more difficult situation. I will say that there are cases where patients who have fallen into this category do respond to acupuncture and get improvement in sexual function, but it is definitely more difficult to treat than the first two cases. The first two cases we have very good response. The third case is more tricky. So this is a bit of an overview on how we approach the treatment of erectile dysfunction with Chinese medicine. You could read our testimonials, read the article that I've written about it. Give us a call, we can discuss it. If you have erectile dysfunction, it really serves you to come in and get treatment. I think you'll be pleased that you did.